Hi everyone, we are Group 3, and our case is about unicorns and IPOs. So in the first part, we're gonna introduce some backgrounds and a common view that concern the relationship between the venture capital and the initial public offering. Also includes some different view from experts who think that too much capital will hurt the IPO performance. Then, in the second part, we will discuss how too much venture capital can hurt IPO and provide a solution and a suggestion in the last part. So let's get started. It's getting more difficulties in going public through an IPO because of overvaluation and hype. A common view in startup community think that when building the very best companies, more capital can be leveraged to accelerate even great growth. In venture capital industry, accept as same rule that in the best outcomes, more money accelerate more success. It makes sense that enriched company should do better than their tightly funded counterpart. Why do they think so? Because most of biggest outcome in venture capital are a result of IPOs. IPO is viewed as a graduation point from the venture capital games, and is largely a directly function of company size. But is it true that raising more capital correlated to better IPO outcomes? Eric Paley and Josephine Flaherty looked at 5 years of funding and IPO data to see if there is a relationship between the amount of funding a startup received from venture capitalists and its ultimate success on the stock market. And they find that there is not a strong correlation between the amount of money a company raised and its ultimate success on a stock market. The better funded companies are not meaningful bigger or better performing, and actually become worse public companies. The study also shows that 14 of the top 20 IPO performers of the last 5 years raised less than 125 million in total venture capital. Why this happened? They concluded that too much capital over time creates a culture that's bad for creativity and operation discipline. Big balance sheets allow companies to grow inefficiently, to paper over problems with staff number and spend, rather than confronting the core inch of value creation. However, having less money forces a management team to make hard decisions early on, and to cut off potentially wasteful problems that may otherwise could linger indefinitely. This efficient ethos becomes part of a long-term culture of productivity performance that is difficult to infuse in the enriched company that never operated in a constrained way. Now we're gonna see how too much venture capital can hurt IPO performance in the second part.
Now we will discuss about why venture capital will hurt the IPO of the companies. First, I want to say that too much venture capital will hurt the core creativity of companies. Our hypothesis is that too much venture capital might mislead the startup company to solve the problems they met at the beginning of their business by money, instead of real innovation and competitive power, thus hurt the core creativity of the company. At the beginning stage of the business, venture capital could help the startup companies to live through the hard time. But if the company received too much venture capital, the company might got used to solve the problems they met, for example, the poor sales, with the power of capital, like buying advertisement, not the real technological or service innovation. On the other hand, less venture capital would force the owner of the company to try to solve problems in a more efficient way and force the company to provide more competitively powerful product to win the market share. Of course, the venture capital is very useful for startups to survive in the beginning of the business. So, we are not talking about delaying the venture investment, but for the venture company, they may need to monitor more about the usage of the capital. And the startup should also be aware of this risk and try to avoid this trend. Secondly, I want to say that venture capital has bad effect in IPO underpricing. The IPO underpricing phenomenon has been proved by many researchers in different countries. How venture capital effects on this phenomenon also grabs much attention of scholars. Gombers brought up the theory which claimed that the participation of venture capitals would not be helpful in control of the IPO underpricing because of the motivation of reputation, which means that venture capitals are eager to be accepted by the market at the expense of some profit. Several studies examined that the effects of venture capital on the IPO underpricing phenomenon and proposed a significant point of view that firms which joined the venture capital are less underpriced than those firms without venture capital. Barry explains his point IPO with better monitors by comparing the firms which joined venture capital and ones which without venture capital from 1978 to 1987. Certificate hypotheses by empirical research for the venture capitals participating are able to reduce the degree of information asymmetry. In brief, the certification hypothesis illustrates that the price of firms with venture capital supported are closer to the intrinsic value because of the venture capital's reputation in the capital market. While Gombers proposed the ground-standing theory, which claimed that the quality of venture capital supported firms are better than firms without venture capital supported, mainly because the venture capital's management experience. In addition, Chalmers believed that market power, which consider the reputation of venture capital, attracts more investors. As a result, the price of these firms will be higher than those without venture capital supported. So, in brief, prior research indicates that the function that venture capital bring into the firm and the superiority of venture capital company. Our project explores the relationship between venture capital and the IPO underpricing phenomenon. Our results showed that the venture capital isn't effective in reducing the IPO underpricing. Even more, the venture capital has a positive correlation with IPO underpricing for the reason of the ground-standing theory and the market power by empirical research. This research shows some features of the IPO market, while there are still some inadequate needs for further researchers.
In addition to deliver massive collateral damage in the course of its work,
The prevalent venture capital model rejects all ideas that do not fit within its narrow definition of a suitable investment. Most limited partners are very large financial institutions, like corporates or a university endowment, and they work with venture capital as a part of diversified investment strategy. They have pockets of money in all kinds of places, and venture is added in to ensure they have some high risk, high reward investments. These don't necessarily even deliver better returns. It's really there to get the right mix of risk in the portfolio. In most cases, the LPs are represented by people who not fit in at a venture firm because they are usually finance people in governmental or non-profit institutions. Venture capitalists take the LP's money and use it to buy stock from startups. Once invested, the fund holds a bunch of stock instead of a bunch of money. Crucially, this stock is all in private companies, which means it's generally illiquid. It's also usually preferred stock, which means the investors get a few extra terms around control and how cash is distributed if there is a below value exit. VC funds are limited partnerships with strict rules about what can be done with the money. No matter where you are in a fund cycle, as a company gets sold for cash, you have to distribute the cash to your investors, and you can't reinvest it in another company. But of course, you can keep 20% for yourself, and that's called the carry. But this is only generally true. For that firms and companies that don't have this restriction are called evergreen funds and are usually funded by a single institution or family. The last important reason we thought is that distributing shares to LPs is a big risk to the company that got funded by the VC. As you can see, if this were a traditional fund, like you might buy in a brokerage account, there would be plenty of ways to make money, and the investors could deliver returns however they want. They could rely on the growth, dividends, sales, or anything else. But for VCs, the distribution on an exit is the primary mechanism to return capital for their investors. And the other way is for a company to go public. This is a wilder one. It's discussed as an exit because it allows investors to return capital to their LPs, but it doesn't convert shares directly into cash. The difference is that the stock is now liquid, which means it's basically equivalent to cash. The venture capitals distribute the now public shares to their LPs, who can now all trade it in for cash whenever they want. If 50% of a company's stock is owned by investors, and they distribute all of that stock to their LPs the day a company's lock-up period ends, what do you think the LPs would do? Well, they are not experts in technology, or high-growth companies, and more importantly, this stock doesn't fulfill the same needs as the VC fund did in their asset allocation. So they sell it. Of course, and what happens to a new public company who find that 50% of its shares are suddenly sold on the public market? The stock gets hammered because a huge upsurge in supply means an equivalent drop in price.
Well, as we have seen the fact that too much venture capital will hurt IPO, we are wondering that if there is alternative can help the company when they are holding their IPO. The good news is that startups shouldn't be left without any access to capital after the venture capital bubble burst. Increasingly, we are seeing successful young companies find alternatives to the traditional venture-backed financing model. First of all, we can see the bootstrap. When the startups can afford it, they are bootstrapping, building their business without outside financing as much as possible. If you raise money from venture capital, you can get up and running almost immediately. You will be able to invest in hypergrowth, and as long as your metrics keep looking good, you can always raise more money to fund even faster growth. Bootstrap takes a lot longer to get to that scaling phase, but it leaves you with many more options once you get there. For example, since we don't have any shareholders to worry about, we can do things that aren't really considered good business, like charging low prices and going after micro businesses, which are generally considered bad customers for startups. But because we aren't required to maximize shareholder value, that's not a problem for us. Even better, because our approach doesn't appeal to venture capitalists or of our venture capital-backed competitors, will have a tough time competing in our niche. In addition, business development corporations have taken off in recent years, providing loans to small businesses that fall in between the high growth favored by venture capitals and the more established companies that can get financing from big banks. As below figure shows, many business development corporations earn solid returns on capital by investing in stable, cash flow generating businesses rather than chasing after unicorns. For example, the Main Street Capital Corporation, the ROIC is 12.3% and overrating is attractive. And there are lots of different corporations have different figures, so we can see these examples. So, for too many years, venture capitalists have held the mindset that the ultimate goal is a lucrative exit from an IPO. With that option starting to dry up, maybe we'll start seeing a shift in attitudes and more young companies being pushed to create sustainable business models and cash flows, rather than just focusing so heavily on customer acquisition. Not only would this be better for the overall economy, it would lead to companies being much more attractive investment when they hold their IPOs. If the industry could develop a funding model that was as compelling to founders as is the current venture capital model, the dysfunction that we are experiencing would be reduced as businesses naturally gravitated to whichever fit them best. Okay, this is our group's presentation, and thanks for listening.